The Rebbe says that basically the life of the Beinoni is that he's in full control of his thought, speech, and action. And that's what makes him a Beinoni. As we spoke about it a few times, that the mandate of Torah is that we should be careful, we should be completely clean with our thought, speech, and action, and which means that our godly thought, speech, and action should always be dominant, as opposed to our, or rather, and even mitzvahs say in the positive mitzvahs, that our thought, speech, and action should be again dominant, not taken over by any other energy and force which is going to persuade us to be laid back. Again, when you're talking about mitzvahs say, we learn Torah and do all the mitzvahs, learn Torah diligently, as the Alter Rebbe explains about the mitzvah of Limud Torah, or any other mitzvah, to do it the way we're supposed to be doing, not to be lazy, not to be laid back, and do the mitzvah, come on, daven and learn and do all the things that we're supposed to do. But ultimately, this is all expressions of the thought, speech, and action of the godly soul. The dominance over here is the thought, speech, and action of the godly soul over the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul. Meaning that the animal soul never expresses its thought, speech, and action in an ungodly. The animal soul never expresses its thought, speech, and action in an animalistic manner. Meaning that every thought with this Beinoni thinks it's aligned with godliness, it's aligned with God's purpose, God's desire. Every word he says is aligned with God's purpose, desire. Maybe learning Torah, maybe prayer, maybe just saying a kind word to another person, and the like. And when dealing with thoughts, all his thoughts are completely aligned with Ratzon Hashem, starting from the losses chas v'shalom, never transgresses, never allowed any thought to come in which is inappropriate. And on mitzvah say, all his thoughts are full. All his thoughts again in the positive, in the positive dimension. His thoughts are thoughts of Torah, thoughts of prayer, etc. So he's completely pure with God's mandate in the Torah, which is making sure that our thoughts, speech, and action are 100% aligned with Ratzon Hashem, with Hashem's desire. So, this, in the end of the day, thought, speech, and action are called the garments. What's going on with the inside of the Nefesh Elikis, with the core of the Nefesh Elikis? What is the core of the Nefesh Elikis? Alter Rebbe has an entire chapter, dedicates an entire chapter, which is the third chapter, which describes what the Nefesh Elikis is. Literally analyzes and dissects what the Nefesh Elikis, what is the core of the godly soul. So he explains. The core of the godly soul, again, everybody's invited to look into the third chapter. The Rebbe deals strictly with the godly soul itself, strictly with the godly soul, at the core of the godly soul, as opposed to the garments of the godly soul, which is the fourth chapter. Fourth chapter begins, the godly soul, as additional to the soul itself, has garments, like ourselves. We have ourselves, right? And then we have garments which we wear. Most of the time they're connected. As we present ourselves with our garments, we go out with our garments. Our garments are always together with us. Depending if it's cold, if it's part of the day, if it's part of the season, we're always together. But in the end, but ultimately, it's two separate entities. It's the person with his garments. Many times they're very close, always close, and they're very much performed together. But it's two worlds. There's the etzem, the essence of the person, and the garments which he puts over him. Similarly, the Nefesh Elikis. Alter Rebbe begins this fourth chapter. Every godly soul has its garments. What are the garments of the Nefesh Elikis? The thought, speech, and action. And again, we said that is the mandate of a Yid, to make sure that his thought, speech, and action maintain its constant connection, to HaKadosh Baruch on a constant basis. What about the core of the Nefesh? Again, how did Alter Rebbe describe the core of the Nefesh Elikis? So the Nefesh Elikis itself, and again dedicated a whole chapter within the third chapter, it's the Chabad, which is the intellect of the godly. The godly soul has its set of Chachma Bina Das, and there's a set of Ches Midot, which are the character, the attributes, which are Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayt, Yisod, Malchus. In this particular chapter, the Alter Rebbe doesn't go through every single one of them, but he sets the bases templates for what the midas are all about, starting from chesed and gvura, which are the two important main midas, because ultimately all the others are really branched off from chesed, and conversely gvura. But chesed is associated with Abba, love to Hashem. Gvura is fear of Hashem, the expression of the feeling of reverence of Hashem, etc. So this is the etzem, the nefesh elikis. It's in its ability to intellectualize ungodly matters and godliness, to have a comprehensive understanding of God and godliness, and consequently develop a feeling towards God and godliness, a love, a fear. Similarly, like anybody, you understand something thoroughly, have a comprehensive understanding of something, you have a drive to it. If it's something which is dangerous, you stay away from it, because ultimately intellect produces feelings. Feelings are a direct cause and effect, a consequence of your understanding of something. So when the godly soul understands godliness, the heart, the godly, the nefesh elikis, which, as we mentioned, has a station in the heart, and it arouses itself to love and fear Hashem. So this is we mentioned it a few times. The godly soul itself, when it intellectualizes only on godliness, because it doesn't have any interest in understanding anything else. How a camera works, how a car works. It's a godly soul. It's part of God. It's part of God. It's an innate and inherent makeup. Or as it has the ability to understand something, what does it understand? It's God. Intellectualizes godliness, because it's a part of God, nothing else. It's the animal soul which counters that Chabad. In other words, instead of understanding godliness, an animal soul tries to understand the benefit of things which are animalistic. But the soul itself, it's God. It's a part of God. So, and consequently, if it has a love, there's a love to Hashem. The core of the nefesh elikis is a love to Hashem. It fears Hashem, nothing else, because the whole makeup is a nefesh elikis. Remember, we have two complete souls. There's two distinct souls which exist within the Yid. It's not one which has two dimensions. To say, is it only God? God. Nefesh elikis is only God, and its whole experience is a godly experience. Conversely, the nefesh bahamis has its whole setup. It has its garments, which is thought, speech, and action, to think, speak, and do things which are animalistic. But besides that, because it's also, again, thought, speech, and action are garments, and the nefesh bahamis also has its own structure, which is its intellect. Now, are animals intellectual? Not very intellectual, but they still have some understanding where to go in order to pursue with its indulgence and things which it wants to pursue. And if it's in eating and sleeping, it knows where the barn is, it knows where the food is. It has a certain understanding. Our animal soul is not very intellectual, like to say that it's not very intellectual, but it has some understanding. It sends the actual message to the heart to be driven. How does it know? How does the heart?
Call that instinctive rather than intellectual.
You could say instinctive, but it's still by the animal it's more instinctive. But by us, if we use many times our brain, to figure out things which are not necessarily contributing, not to our service to God, and not necessarily does it contribute to our well-being, and sometimes it's destructive, but we invest our mind in certain things which we shouldn't invest our mind in. And again, even things which are difficult to figure out, right? Somebody who has a job in the middle of his, or somebody who's going to figure out something which is not relevant to him, it could be destructive to him, so he's using his mind to figure something out, and eventually if he figures something out and he finds it to be contributing to his benefit or contributing to his pleasure, so eventually it will send a signal after he figures out. He uses his brain, his intellect to some degree, right? Because it's in the end of the day, it's not so. The animal soul is not essentially intellectual as the godly soul, but there's some intellect which will produce a person that doesn't have. In one hand, the fact that we live in this world, we mentioned a few times, we're automatically driven to worldly things which are worldly, things which are animalistic, things which are bodily, right? But not everything. Many times we use our intellect to figure out how to be and would send the signal to the heart, which would intensify the drive, which without figuring it out somewhat on an intellectual level, our heart would not be so driven to this, that, and the other. which ultimately would express in our thought, speech, and action, indulging in this physical or in this animalistic and this worldly matter.
It sounds like what you're describing is the way we will use our mind to rationalize following through on maybe more base instinctive drives.
Yeah, that would be a very good description. Thank you. Excellent. Because in the end of the day, our mind does play a role.
When we rationalize,
right.
Like an animal, if he has a desire, will just pursue it. But a human being, particularly if he knows it's maybe wrong or it's not
right.
the best way to use his energies,
right.
will use our chokhmah, I guess,
yes.
to try to create a rationalization for more animalistic behavior.
Yeah. Very well said. But because there's the mind understands it, that intensifies the drive to it. Because attributes are a direct derivative from intellect. They're a direct consequence, direct result. When a person understands, he's driven to it. It may be through love, ava, or yira, fear, or any other of the seven characters. Now, so we have so when we're dealing with the Beinoni of the way we said till now, that the machshav dibur ma'aseh, we learned that till last week, the thought, speech, and action, or we stopped last week, right? The thought, speech, and action of the godly soul is completely dominant over the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul. And we say completely dominant means to say that the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul doesn't play a role in the Beinoni's life, because if he's speaking something which is inappropriate, he's a rasha. If he speaks something inappropriate. Animalistic means to say without any godly purpose. And again, there's different levels when we say animalistic, as we elaborated on a few times. Animalistic could be starting with something which is mutter, permitted, but permitted without a purpose. That itself is a problem. You can be called a rasha for that itself, especially when from the permitted to the prohibited, when there's a taiva, when there's a lust, a drive, there's no real stop sign. That might be official halacha, there's a stop sign, but in the person's expression, not necessarily there's a stop sign. So if it's animalistic, it's rasha. So the godly thought, speech, and action are completely dominant over the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul. It means to say they're not in function, they're not present, they're completely shunned. Okay, so you have the dominance, as the Alter Rebbe expresses this idea in the in the previous chapters, like as two kings fighting over a certain territory. If you're winning, means to say you're the only one who's present on the territory. No one else is present on the territory, because if the other one's present on the territory, so you're not winning, right? So when we're dealing with the godly nefesh, thought, speech, and action, we say that is dominant over the animal thought, speech, and action. It means to say that's the only thing which is present. And let's put it on. We talk on the ground. The thought is completely associated synonymous with the Ratzon Hashem. The speech is completely aligned with Ratzon Hashem, and so is action. Okay. Now when we cover so now let's look at the core of the nefesh bahamis, and the core of the nefesh lakis. In other words, the inner dimensions of these two forces, of these two kings, which in the end of the day, they also want this neutral territory. The godly soul doesn't want to be just sufficient with his thought, speech, and action. He wants, if the person has a heart, the godly soul wants the person to love Hashem. If he has fear, he wants him to fear Hashem. And not anything different. The godly soul doesn't, we learned in the chapter, it was 9 or 10, 9, that the godly soul, in the chapter 9, the godly soul wants everything. Like a king really doesn't want just part of, just a currency, or he wants the entire territory should be completely surrendered to his mashmas, to what he stands for, his king, just like his own territory. He doesn't want to be any difference between his own territory and this territory they're fighting on. He wants everything. And what does the other king want? Everything. And in this context, the nefesh bahamis, nefesh likis, they're fighting in essence also not only in the world of thought, speech, and action. In the core of the nefesh likis wants to be completely dominant over this neutral territory, which is the body. Meaning to say that if it has any ability to intellectualize, it wants to intellectualize in godliness, not anything else. Not to rationalize, like you're saying, anything else, which would maybe make sense for the animal soul. Or some animalistic concept. If it has fear, it wants to fear Hashem. If it has love, it wants to love Hashem. Conversely, nefesh bahamis wants the opposite. It wants to maintain its bahamisdikait, its animalistic stand. That you're human and you are inclined to everything which is animalistic. May it be something, and it will always constantly, we said, the struggle of the BAYT sends a signal. Who's sending the signal? It's the animalistic heart and saying, do that, think that, say that. It means to say it's so much alive. So on the core levels, the Nefesh Elokis is not really winning. The Nefesh Elokis on the core level is not really winning it wants to be completely in charge. It wants to be completely in charge of the entire in neutral territory, which is the body. That's in essence, that's its desire. It doesn't want any of the Nefesh Bahamis and the animal soul on the territory, but in the life of the Bain and the life of the Tzaddik, it's pretty much doing that. But in the life of like in the two levels, Tzaddik Gomer, Tzaddik Sheni Gomer, by the Nefesh Bahamis, and the Nefesh Bahamis is very much alive, very much potent. It's very much there. So on the core level, Nefesh Elokis is not winning over the Nefesh Bahamis. So it's really much. So there is no really. He's not really winning. So if he's not really winning, what's the point? So what the point is of this dominance only on the thought, speech, and on the garment level, we'll find out later, chapter Lamed Hey, Lamed Vav. But right now, the way the Alter Rebbe is describing the Bain, and he says, that's the fact, that on that level, there he's truly there, Nefesh Elokis is truly not winning. With one exception. That a certain part of the day in the experience of the Avodah of the Nefesh Bahamis, Nefesh Elokis is completely dominant over the entire city of an entire territory, which in this case is the experience of the person, in other words, the person himself, which the Alter Rebbe calls the ear, the city. When is that? The time of davening. When a person exercises a true healthy davening, what's happening is in that moment is the Nefesh Elokis completely takes over the core of the Nefesh Bahamis. And when we say a successful davening, a person can and should and pursue a healthy davening, means to say not only should I be lip service, he should try to daven like a mensch, based on the way the halacha is, be calm before davening, make his right preparation, as the Gemara says, the halacha says. Different ways a person can't just jump in from nowhere and just daven. It has to be an experience, because in the end of the day, davening, a healthy davening, is that a person could really feel a sense of closeness, dveikus, to the extent of intimacy with his Creator. And intimacy is associated with the most core parts of a person. It's not a matter of thought, speech, and external thought, speech, and action experience. Closeness, intimacy is the whole being is intimate. So davening, by definition, is intimacy with one's Creator, the closest and most profound levels. So there is kind of a bonus that the Beinoni can have. And we all know that if we make Achana, the davening, the person at the moment he davens, or the time he davens, maybe the 40 minutes, maybe the 20 minutes, sometimes he could feel that ecstasy, that exhilaration, maybe for a few moments, maybe a few seconds sometimes, which is also worth it, that a person is able to lift himself into some level of transcendence, even for a few seconds. But if it's authentic and it's true, it could transform his whole being and his whole experience throughout the entire day. Perhaps give him a different perspective on what life is all about, or the importance of, because he experienced godliness kind of in a visual or true. He lost himself in the experience with God. So godliness, and that's why it's so healthy to daven every day. And like many people ask, just can you give me a quick moment just to finish the sentence? And why do we have to say the same words in the morning, or today, Wednesday, every day the same words? It's kind of silly. When you learn a new piece of Torah, a new piece of Tanya, a new piece of Gemara is one thing, but every day to say the same words. Or within one day, Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv, the same Shemoneh Esrei one time and again. The average for me doesn't have the problem. Or especially when we know what it's all about, because what's the point of davening? It's not lip service. It's the idea of making God the true, in other words, introducing yourself, your own self, convincing yourself ahavta, that you should find within yourself, even for a few moments, that true reality or godly experience, or godly reality experience. And that kind of transforms the next part of the day, in mincha, from mincha to ma'ariv, and ma'ariv to the next morning. Because in the end of the day, it definitely makes us struggle with our animal soul so much easier, because we're introduced, because we authentically or genuinely connect, even for a few seconds, to this something which is completely transcendence, in this case God, that when we finish davening, and we know when we finish davening we're not going to feel the same experience as when we daven, but at least it gives us that push that we could be able to, where we're able, that even we plunge into a level, not chas v'shalom plunge into sin, but the Nefesh Bahamis regains its potency and strength, that we should be able to, on the surface where it counts, that our thought, speech, and action maintain to be pure, and again, mitzvah say, to do everything it has to do.
So this might be nitpicking, but why do they talk about reciting Shema and for prayer. Like when we talk about davening, I always understand davening as Shimon Aisenbach. But here it seems to distinguish it's both of them, right? Except for the time of reciting Shema, and for prayer, I'm understanding prayer as Shimon Aisenbach, right?
Yeah.
So why the distinction? Why not just say
Shemon Esrei
prayer
itself?
that would take in both of those things?
So that's a Kriya Shema Tefillah. And not what? I'm trying to understand.
But I'm just wondering why we have to list both of them.
Because the truth is they're both very different experiences.
Oh, okay.
Look at Kriya Shema. Kriya Shema is more barash, more with a, it says a pasuk. It says like barash. The Navi enumerates different levels. What is a true godly experience? So it says one is beruach with the wind, the one with the rash, with the sound, and then eventually it says no, that's not the climax, or that's not the real deal till kol mamadaka, the certain sense expression of silence, which is really the Navi is saying that the true connection with God is ultimately the state of silence. The climactal state of our connection, relationship with God is more the state of silence, which is really Shemon Esrei. It's silent. It's more like the ultimate expression of intimacy with Hashem. That it's no rash, no screaming, no nothing loud. It's just Baruch Atah. I'm standing face to face and saying like Baruch Atah, blessed are you Hashem. As opposed to V'ahavtas Hashem L'kecha. Look at the Kriya Shema experience. It's not so much face to face yet with God. It's more invoking or convincing myself, my animal soul, to love Hashem. V'ahavtas Hashem L'kecha. Telling myself Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It's a very, very different experience. So we sit by Shema. We're not standing. We don't need to stand. Shema is loud. It's the next, the very, very. It's a step right before Shemon Esrei, even though it's not the climax. Because at the end of the day, Shemon Esrei is where really face to face Baruch Atah Hashem Slach Lanu Atochain, and there's a lot of the Atah as we stand face to face in our experience with Hashem. So it's two separate experiences, and it's elaborated in Chassidus, many discourses. The difference of Kriya Shema, starting Alter Rebbe and L'Kutei Torah, elaborates a lot, and again another work of the Alter Rebbe, the difference of Kriya Shema and Tefillah, but they're two separate worlds. And in a successful davening, we could also experience the distinction between the two.
That's helpful. I'm sorry, you just said convincing the animal soul to what? To love?
To love Hashem. V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. We're talking to ourselves in the end of the day. V'ahavta you. Who are we talking about? Right? Not the one next to the one standing next to you. You love Hashem. I'll remain the. V'ahavtas Hashem. Really talking you. Love Hashem. B'chol levavcha, with all your heart, nafshecha, v'chol meidecha. There, by Shemon Esrei already, we're there already. We reached the level that we're already standing face to face with Hashem. That's why it has to be completely silent, and we don't move, as opposed to Kriya Shema. The halacha changes. It expresses the expressions or the reflects in halacha the difference of Shema and Shemon Esrei. Even Shemon Esrei also. We have to be careful. It's different than the previous parts of davening, but that's the whole idea of elevating yourself to something transcendent. There's different levels. It says davening, the whole expression of davening is sulam mutzav arza v'rosh megei shemaim. It's a ladder which is well anchored in arza, in eretz, in the way we were before davening, very much anchored in worldly matters. The top of the ladder reaches heaven. And a ladder, there's different levels of ladder, there's different steps on the ladder. That's where we come from ourselves, the Aretz, and we start climbing. And there's Psukei Zimra, and there's Birchis Krishma, and there's Krishma, till we reach the Kol Mamadaka, the silent voice, which is again the ultimate expression of you can even use the word intimacy with the Almighty. Right? So that's kind of a bonus in the life of a Beinoni. Because really, in the life of the Beinoni, when a person dies, the famous expression of one of the Sfarim, forget it's a Musa Sefer for that matter, that Shtei Avos they cannot be shochen b'lev in b'bas. You can't love God and love something which is worldly. You can't love God and love the ice cream in the same moment. You can't love two things which are antithetical one to each other. Right? If it's God, it's God. So in the time of davening, the person truly experiences God in by davening, as an example, right? They love to Hashem by davening. So if it's truly v'ahavta, put it this way, if he's successful to reach the level of v'ahavta Hashem l'kecha b'chol levavcha, again, b'chol levavcha is a plural expression, not only with the godly soul, but with the animal soul. It means to say, all about me is loving Hashem. So if you love Hashem at that moment, you're really not loving anything else. Okay, so let's use the words. Loving Hashem at that moment, that is the garment, or that's the core of the soul itself? Anybody can answer? It's the garments or it's the soul itself? The soul itself. Because that's the levavcha, that's the heart. Remember, the heart, the soul itself is a combination of brain, intellect, and heart. And if I explain myself, Shema Yisrael, right? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that's pretty much the intellectual expression, intellectual dimension of my experience in my davening, or saying Kriya Shema, right? It's worthwhile to note the famous question of, I think it was Mr. Magid, the Alter Rebbe, I believe it was Mr. Magid. He said, how could you generally tell a person love Hashem? By definition, it doesn't make sense, right? Think about it. Could you command on love? Can't command on love. Or I love or I don't love. You could tell a person that, let's say, put up a mezuzah. I'm not interested in putting a mezuzah, but you could command, do it anyways. You cannot command on love. Love is something, or it exists, or it virtually does not exist. And if it doesn't exist, command will not help. And if it does exist, I need not a command. It's clear. It'll never go together. Command and love will never go together. What means Bahafta? Love Hashem. So Mr. Magid says that the truth of the matter is, you cannot command Bahafta, but what we're commanded to is Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, hear is not only with your ear, but understand, perceive, intellectualize, use your intellect in perceiving the reality that Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that God is the only, right? Hashem Echad doesn't mean only there's one God in the exclusion of two. I mean Hashem Echad means everything is God, and God is everything. And I profoundly understand that literally when we see everything means that nothing has its own existence, like explained in Chassidus. Hashem is pumping His energy into creation. We say the creation has no existence other than Hashem. All these different types of Izbanuniyot, which means different levels of pondering in the reality of Hashem, which is explained in multiple areas, in Torah and other places, in Chassidus in particular. So that's the Hashem Echad, perceiving, thoroughly using my intellect and Shema Yisrael. I not only again hear, but understand that Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that Hashem is our God and Hashem is truly one. Again, one not to the exclusion of two, but Echad, everything is God. And when I thoroughly understand that, consequently, you will definitely love Hashem, and with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. If we only do it right. So when that experience of Shema Yisrael, which means I'm truly utilizing, and my mind is so vibrant, my intellect is so much involved in understanding Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and then Vahavta, and that really ignites a love to Hashem, that is the core of the Nefesh Elikis. That's not the garment. So that's one part Krishma, and same thing Tefillah, Shemini Esrei, which is even a higher level of the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And understanding Baruch Atah Hashem, and I'm experience that closeness, that dveikus with Hashem, with Hashem. That's my whole being involved in Elokus and godliness. Where's the animal soul at that point? It's dead. Problem is, it's not dead, because something is dead till Tchis HaMesim doesn't get up. It's pretty much sleeping. So that moment, and that's why it's called the bonus, that's the moment of prayer, the Nefesh Bahamis, and Beinani is similar to the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik got rid of his Nefesh Bahamis, and he really killed it like David HaMelech said, again, the two different levels of the Tzaddik, maybe if he killed it, shunned it, crushed it, or transformed it, became an ally, but it's not coming back. By davening, after davening, he walks the street, doesn't have the same tests and experiences or challenges the average person has. Because he's the tzaddik. The Nefesh Bahamis, the problem is, or the classification of Nefesh Bahamis, that it's coming back right after davening. What about in the time of davening? The time of davening, Nefesh Elikis is completely dominant of the Nefesh Bahamis in it, on the core basis, on its level of Seichel, Chabad, Chacham, Bina Das, and Chesed, Bura, Tiferet, that's Chaydi Sema, which is again at the end.
So why wouldn't this be true also of the Rasha?
What did
davening?
So, firstly, the Rasha, it doesn't say that the Rasha can never have a good davening experience. But in the overall, you can never say that the Rasha, the fact is, we're describing firstly the Beinani. You know, like I said, I don't want to be mayach because I'm just thinking if it's worth it to allude to something that the Rebbe says later in the chapter 17. When one repeat, depends what level of Rasha. If someone's really a Rasha, be'emes l'Hashem Rebbe, it means to say he's so involved in things which are inappropriate, immoral, unethical, and so on. It's very unlikely that he's going to arouse within himself true, genuine love to Hashem. So let's say, but you want to say, so therefore the Alter Rebbe does say that someone who's really overly involved in things which are immoral and impure and so on, he has to do a certain, it's a whole seder of tshuva he has to do before he ever gets onto the normal conveyor belt, the regular normal conveyor belt. And it makes only makes sense.
The reason I'm asking is that you were just describing in such a passionate way the transformative potential of good davening.
Right.
So I don't know why it would only be the Beinoni, who is really, as far as we're concerned, the tzaddik, who would be able to tap into that.
Okay.
So for those of us
that's
who
what
might be the higher level of Roshayim,
that's what I'm answering. It could be, that's what I'm saying. The Rosh is someone who's completely indifferent to God and His Torah and His mitzvahs.
No.
The fact is that okay, so the fact is that when you create such a layer of impurity to start loving Hashem, it probably won't happen. Now, Rebbe himself says in the chapter 17, you could see middle of the chapter, he has to have a seder of tshuva in order to break that whole layer which he created, layer of garbage which he created over his neshama, in order to pierce through it, in order to open this this portfolio, this chapter with the Kodesh Baruch. He needs tshuva really to get onto the regular normal conveyor belt. You're talking, let's say, Rosh, somebody who's struggling, he, like the Alter Rebbe says, he didn't make it all the time, he's not yet there, the Beinoni. There's no question that he could probably experience a real healthy davening, for sure, 100%. It's not exclusive to the Beinoni. But with Alter Rebbe describing the Beinoni, which is again, this is a Leo Kolot Mimshich, this is the place where we ought to be, we should know that it's not. Despite Alter Rebbe tells us so clearly that the Nefesh Bahamis is very much vivid and it's very much alive throughout the entire 24 hours a day, and it's always a struggle. When we say it's alive, it means to say the heart is always sending signals to transgress on a thought, speech, and action, and the Beinoni is always, never fails to give in to his thought, speech, and action. Maybe mitzvah leisas, maybe mitzvah say, comes Alter Rebbe and says there's a certain part of the day that the Beinoni is similar to the tzaddik, that the entire experience, the entire nefesh is completely dominant of nefesh bahamis, because one thing is clear, as I mentioned from the Musar Sefer, I can't remember where it is, it's obvious from any Sefer you open up, but the lashon is that the two avas, the two loves, to Olam Hazeh and to God, will never coexist. You cannot love something and the antithesis of the same thing which you're trying to love, or which you're loving. They're not shochen b'toch. So that's why I'm saying this just as a as a precedent, just to say that the when you say that the person is experiencing a healthy davening, in the same words you're really saying that the nefesh bahamis is completely put away. It must mean that, because you cannot love Hashem and love something else which is antithesis to Hashem. So the nefesh bahamis is put away. Oh, that comes to mind. What? Oh, that's the tzaddik. That's similar to the life of the tzaddik. And nefesh bahamis is completely put down, as expression is, right? The answer is yes. And Alter Rebbe uses the expression so beautifully later. I don't know if it's in this pedic. But when it comes to the nefesh bahamis, he uses the expression later in the next chapter that the difference if someone is dead or someone sleeping. If you look from the distant, right? If you look close, you see that there's something moving and the heart, the person's breathing. So, but from the distant, you see there's two people. Chas v'shalom. Rahman is going to be very, very technical, but just let's say two people. One is dead and one is sleeping. You look from the distance; they both look exactly the same. How do you know which one is alive, even when they're both laying on the floor in the same position? When one later gets up, then you know that initially, before when you looked at him, he wasn't really dead. But the experience or the way they appear externally, they both look the same. You can never distinguish who's alive, who's dead. Again, you get close, you can, but from distant, you can never know. I mean, obviously, not when you go to someone's bedroom, you don't believe that he's dead. But, hopefully, right? But in a place where you don't have any other reason, put it this way, to describe if he's alive or dead. You see two people in a crazy place, and they're both in a position like that, right? You can't know who's alive, who's dead till one gets up. You know that 10 minutes ago when I looked, one gets up, one doesn't. You say that the one who got up, and when I looked at him 10 minutes ago, he was also alive. Again, I don't want to get technical, and it's not a pleasant example. But what we're saying over here, that in the life of the Beinoni, when you're thinking about the Beinoni, he's so similar to the tzaddik. The tzaddik got rid of his nefesh bahamis, his yetzer hara, or his nefesh bahamis is completely put away. And if you look at the time in the Beinoni is davening, it's extremely similar to the life of the tzaddik, completely. Or at least on the surface, it appears that this is a tzaddik type of experience. The Nefesh Bahamis is not in function and not intact at all. How do you know that he's not the tzaddik? There's only one way to know. That after davening, he's going to walk outside. The tzaddik will walk outside. To him, the whole 24 hours are kind of a davening experience. Not exactly sure how to describe the life of the tzaddik because I don't understand it exactly. So I'm not there. Halavaya Beitin, like we said, right? But if you look at the life of the Beitin, he walks outside. Suddenly he has brand new challenges like he never davened before. He walks by the street and he has to control his eyes from something which is pulling him in a very different direction, a very animalistic direction. Maybe his thoughts, and he has a taiva to speak a lashon hara, or to do something which is inappropriate also. What happened to the whole ava, what you just had to Kadosh Baruch Hu? The answer is that it was momentarily. It was for the time. He has a bonus for the time of davening that that he's similar to the life to the tzaddik, which means he could put down the mishpah at the time of davening. After davening, the Alter Rebbe's expression again. This is which sets such clarity, not to confuse ourselves. Yes, after davening, that whole experience is going to completely be behind the Beinani, and he'll walk outside and he'll have the exact same challenges as the Rosh or any other person. So in the sense that someone's going to say, well, that's pretty much aggravating. What's the point? Why that dichotomy? Why that being thrown from one world to the other? On one hand, the other hand, quite on the contrary. It gives a certain calmness to the Beinani, or to us, in our Avodas Hashem, that even if we do succeed with a successful davening, that we truly elevated ourselves to have a dveikus, a true, genuine connection to the divine, and then 10 minutes later, when we walk out of shul, we have this type and that type and that type, we should not say, uh-oh, what's wrong? And lose it and fall into despair. No, that is what the Beinani is, and that's what they love. This is our mandate. Now the whole experience of davening is gone. You're not the tzaddik. When will I be the tzaddik? When God will decide you should be the tzaddik. As long as God didn't decide you should be the tzaddik, you'll be the Beinani. And God has a pleasure of me turning my eyes away from this, not saying this, and not speaking that for how long? For the next 100 years, or till Hashem decides. Why does He have pleasure? That's His business. What's behind it, we'll learn more about it. Perhaps we'll never get to the end. What's God's pleasure? Why did He create the world to begin with? But in the end of the day, He has a pleasure from this. He has a pleasure of the life of the tzaddik, and He has a pleasure of the life of the Beinani when you're in your struggle with your challenges and you're going to overcome, even on the thought, speech, and level and action level, not in your core. I'll give you the bonus, and perhaps the bonus will give you the energy to put things in perspective, or the actual koyach to be 100% pure. Remember, we said 100%. If it's a thought, 100% means to say that even when you're dealing with something millisecond challenges, perhaps it'll give me the energy, it'll set clarity, what's the emes, and it'll give me actually a lot of koyach. But in the end of the day, it's my choice which I'm going to be making if I chas v'shalom should transgress or should not transgress. And if I'm the Beinani, I will never transgress. So it's important to daven. And the davening is not only a bonus, the expression of the Gemara, halavai sheispalotim kolayim kol. The Gemara says halavai, a person should daven a whole day. It's so much enriched in that statement by this Perek Tanya, because I don't want to go to another, because I love the experience of the tzaddik. If I could sit in Krishma and that expression of intimacy with the Almighty for 24 hours, why not? At the end of the day, not everybody could do it or could afford to do it, because we have to go learn Torah or go to work and so on. So most of us, or 99% of us, we'll have to close the city, do Eis Shalom, and get out there. And then what happens out there? God is having pleasure that despite you lost the whole experience of davening, and don't think that it's going to stay with you, but He wants you to struggle. In other words, Nefesh Bahamis will kick in and tell you and send all those signals to think, speak, do, contrary to Hashem, or be laid back, not to think, speak, and do. Then we have to do. And you're there, and you never fall even once. You're the Beinani. That's an enormous pleasure Hashem has. What does He want from me? That's what He wants from you.
That goes back to what we were saying, that maybe the Beinani earns more sfar, because if that's the pleasure that Hashem has.
Okay, let's say.
Steinfeld has such a nice way of putting it, the difference.
Okay, go ahead.
The Beinani is one who must constantly guard his frontiers, and he is one who does so successfully. The Rasha is one whose frontier has breaches, whereas the Tzaddik has no frontiers at all.
Right.
The Tzaddik has achieved a permanent peace. No battles rage within him because there are no frontiers.
Right. Exactly. But the Beinoni has that with them. Now, I'm going to have to ask you people a favor. And the favor is like this. I cannot afford to go through the entire class without reading any text. It'll probably take, on the watch, 4 minutes. But let's just read it because we really explained everything. I know it's after the time. But just to read, because we really said it all orally. So please let's just till at least to the dot over here in the Tanya, which is Ein Sof Baruch Hu. We're holding Achmahus V'Atzmos Nefesh, which is again on the third page number 3. Achmahus, it's really the first however, right? The essence of being, you have it? Okay? Achmahus V'Atzmos Nefesh, which is again the essence and the being of the godly soul itself. Shehin Eser B'chinas, which is the 10 levels, which is Chacham Min Hadas, the intellect and the emotion and the attributes of the godly soul. On a normal basis, again, not by davening, on any other time other than davening, they don't have the dominance. They don't have the complete governing over this small city. That's the life of the tzaddik. In the Beinoni, it's not so. Only kim bitim muzumanim at special times, in the time of Krishma, for that matter, it's not only it's not something which we do on our own. There's a special window open above, which is when a person puts on is standing in shul, maybe shachris mincha ma'ariv, that window opens up, and that's when the person is introduced to this bonus that he's able to experience the entire, in other words, which is completely dominant, or the entire experience is a godly experience. It says Shimshas Meichin de Gadlos. It's a time when a certain window is open. It's called Meichin de Gadlos, which means grand intellect, literally, if you want to translate it, Meichin de Gadlos, grand intellect, which is again that window is open, Lamaila, in the heavens above. The Gam Lamata, it's open, that we should tune into that station is open, those vibes are there, that we can tune into it, which is Shas HaKesh L'Chaladim, which is an appropriate time, an auspicious time, or a conducive time would be the right word. He's able to connect his intellect to HaKadosh, to profoundly ponder on the greatness of Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite of Hashem, blessed be He, to arouse a love, kirish be'esh, with a fiery love, b'chol ha'yimani, if we remember that the godly soul is as well a station on the right arch, believe in his heart, and that love which will ultimately lead that he would have this drive to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'kiyam ha'Torah mitzvah, in fulfilling the Torah and doing its mitzvahs, may avo, out of love. At that time he's completely in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Torah and mitzvahs are something so very natural. This is which is explained in Krishma, this which is elaborate in Krishma, which Krishma itself, the 3 parshas, is a Torah command. And its brachas prior to that, the beautiful sayings and the brachas and the phrases and the expressions which we have in the brachas, which are before and after, are a preparation to fulfilling the mitzvah of Ahavtas Hashem L'kecha, loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the Alter Rebbe is going to explain later. Shemi D'Rabbanan, which ultimately the Rabbanan, that was Alter Rebbe says the Krishma itself is Deiraisa, is a Torah command. The brachas before and after a rabbinic command. They're Achana L'Kriyam HaKrishma. They are preparation for fulfilling the mitzvah of Krishma, which is again V'Ahavtas Hashem L'kecha. Like he's explaining in Malkam Acha, which the Alter Rebbe explains it towards the end. I believe it's in chapter 49. V'oz, what happens then? Harash b'chol ha'shmali, the evil which is on the left side, which is in the animal side, the animalistic ra, which is the chabad, the core of the nefesh b'amis, is then kaf oval batal l'tev. It's completely subordinate and completely nullified to the good hamispashet, which in the time of prayer as it stands in complete expression b'chalei imani, in the right side of the heart. From the intellect which exists in the meich. If you remember, the way the Alter Rebbe said, the station of the nefesh the station of the godly soul, it has its main station and its satellite station. The main station is in the mind, because it's essentially intellectual, and it begins everything with Chabad. And like we said before, Shema Yisrael, where does the person able to reach the level of Ahavtas Hashem L'kecha, when he has a complete and thorough and comprehensive understanding on Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, or Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is the Shema Yisrael. That's the Chabad, that's the intellectual experience, which is again starts from the brain and eventually signals to the base, or to the station which it has in its heart, in order to not only understand, have a comprehensive understanding on Hashem, of again associated with Chacham Bina Das, but more so to have a true, genuine love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. So it starts from the Mei Chabad Shemameich HaMekusharim, which is connected B'Gdula Saint Baruch Hu, and the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite God, blessed be He, which eventually, like we just said, will send a signal to the heart. The heart should experience a love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that's only by davening. And after that, we'll stop over here, and then V'achar Tefillah. Don't get lost. Don't fall into despair. That whole experience is gone, but at least it puts things in perspective. You don't lose yourself. You know, say, where am I? And one of the biggest obstacles in our Avodas Hashem is we're not focused, and we think we figured it out, and we realize we didn't figure it out. We become lost, and then it becomes yiyush, and as we fall into despair, and then we kind of drop everything. It's not working for me anyways, right? The fact that I thought I loved HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I thought I had a true experience, a good experience with davening, and then I went outside and I have these challenges, it's not working. Might as well drop the whole thing to begin. I don't mean to drop the whole thing, not become from a Yid, but the interest in my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't find really any way that I'm going to ever interact with it. Comes out to Rebbe and says that's a tone of clarity, such a tone of clarity, that's the time of davening, and after that, it's not happening. Forget it. You're going to do Eisa Shalom. The davening is going to be behind you till the next time you daven. You could have a reshima, a mark of it. Again, it could help you in your Avodah. But the experience of davening is going to be behind you. Now the Eibishter appreciates that your experience of davening is behind you, and you're going to have the new struggle of making sure your thought, speech, and action are pure. So once you have that clarity, so you know that that's the perfect relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, especially the Beinoni, which this is where we ought to draw ourselves, to be with Beinoni, till Hashem decides if we're going to be a tzaddik. Have a good night.